Hello everybody, welcome back to another exciting edition of Ed Puzzle Lecture Notes. Today we're going to go over exactly how this light-dependent reaction, this reaction in photosynthesis actually occurs. So it's not just what are the reactants and the products, but why is water necessary in the light-dependent reaction? How is oxygen gas given off? And how exactly is ADP converted into ATP? And how is NADP converted into NADPH? Alright, before we get into it, let's look at how electricity is produced using water. Now obviously this thing right here is a dam. It is holding back all of this water, which is making a reservoir or a lake. Now obviously we have a high concentration of water up here in the lake, and we have a low concentration of water down here in the river below the dam. Now if we remember from diffusion, molecules like to move from areas of high concentration to low concentration. And here in the dam, they store all this water. They make a high concentration of water on one side of the dam and a low concentration on the other. Well, they get this water to flow down and through turbines. Those turbines spin and create electricity. So what you need to remember is, in this case, the movement of water can create electricity, can create energy. Well, the same thing happens within the thylakoids. The thylakoids are going to use movement, not of water, but of ions in order to create energy. And in that case, it's going to create the energy molecule ATP. Alright, so this is how it works. This little rectangular structure right here, that is the thylakoid. That is the green discs within the chloroplasts called the thylakoids. Remember, that's where the light-dependent reaction occurs. And it occurs on what's called an electron transport chain. Now, obviously, since it's an electron transport chain, we're going to need electrons for this. We're going to need electrons for the electron transport chain. And who gives up the electrons? Right there. That is a water molecule, H2O. This is water's role in photosynthesis. Water comes to this protein structure, this green structure right there, and its name is Photosystem 2. Photosystem 2. And it donates electrons into the protein structure, into Photosystem 2. When water donates 2 electrons into Photosystem 2, it splits into its 2 hydrogens and its 1 oxygen. So you can see we have now gained 2 more hydrogen ions inside of the thylakoid. Think of the thylakoid kind of like the lake in the previous slide. And we've also added 1 blue circle there, another oxygen. Well, these 2 blue oxygen atoms bond together to form O2, and that is what is released into the air. So that is how oxygen gas is created during the light reaction. Now we're going to get back to the electrons in photosystem 2, right here. Photosystem 2, the green thing. Light energy is used to energize those electrons, to give them more energy. The electrons are then passed down the chain. So they got energy from the sun, and they're passed through this protein structure called plastoquinone. You don't need to know that. And then to the protein structure cytochrome. When it reaches cytochrome, the energy from those electrons is used to pump into the thylakoid hydrogen ions. So as you can see, we just gained 2 more hydrogen ions, or red circles, inside of the thylakoid. We are getting a high concentration of hydrogen ions on the inside and a lower concentration of hydrogen ions on the outside. Now back to the electron. The electron gets passed to another protein called plastocyanin. You won't need to know that. And then passed to this other protein structure called photosystem 1. Here, energy from the sun re-energizes those electrons. It gives them more energy again. Now the electrons are now re-energized again. they get passed to a protein structure called ferredoxin, and then finally to a final protein structure, an enzyme called NADP reductase. Two of these electrons, as well as one hydrogen ion, bond with NADP, and that is how we make NADPH. And that NADPH is going to go to the light independent, or the Calvin cycle, to help power it to make glucose. So the electrons are energized in photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. Their energy is used to pump in hydrogen ions when it gets to cytochrome, and then they bond with NADP to form NADPH. Now, hopefully you can see we have a high concentration of hydrogen ions inside the thylakoid, and we have a low concentration of hydrogen ions outside. Well, if we remember facilitated diffusion, those guys want to move from high to low. They cannot pass through the phospholipid bilayer, but they can go through this special protein structure called ATP synthase. And just like water going through turbines in a dam creates electricity, the movement of these hydrogen ions through ATP synthase, that movement is used to convert ADP and turn it into ATP, which will then go on to the light independent reaction of the Calvin cycle to help make glucose. All right, so here's what I said in like paragraph form. So remember that the role of water in the light dependent reaction is that it needs the electrons to go into the electron transport chains. So water gets split, basically it's blown apart into its two hydrogens and its oxygen, and the two electrons go into photosystem 2. Remember, that is where the sunlight energizes those electrons using the pigment chlorophyll. So those electrons get energized. They then are passed down the chain, and when they reach the protein structure called cytochrome, the energy from those electrons is used to pump hydrogen ions inside the thylakoid. Just sort of like filling up the lake on one side of a dam, because you need a high concentration of hydrogen ions on one side of the membrane. This is what's going to create what's called a concentration gradient, which basically means there's a high concentration on one side of the thylakoid and a low concentration on the outside. Well, with that concentration gradient, with high concentration of hydrogen ions on the inside, they want to diffuse out. They want to get out from high to low. Well, they go through the protein structure, the enzyme called ATP synthase, which uses those hydrogen ions moving out, that energy to convert ADP, add another phosphate to it to make it ATP. And that's facilitated diffusion, if you remember from the first semester. Well, eventually those electrons need to go somewhere. We can't have a pile of electrons at the end of the chain, but they're needed. 2 electrons and 1 hydrogen bond on to NADP to form the energy molecule NADPH. That is how the 2 energy molecules NADPH and ATP are created to power the Calvin cycle, or the light independent reaction. All right, so here it is once again. Water donates 2 electrons into photosystem 2. Those electrons are energized by sunlight. They're passed down the electron transport chain through plastoquinone and plastocyanin. When it reaches plastocyanin, that energy is used to pump in 2 hydrogen ions inside the thylakoid. The electron is now passed down to plastocyanin and then to photosystem 1. It's lost its energy by pumping in those hydrogen ions, so that those electrons are re-energized by the sun. It's passed on to ferredoxin and finally NADP reductase, where 2 electrons and 1 hydrogen bond with NADP to form the energy molecule NADPH. And that goes on to power the Calvin cycle, or the light independent reaction. Now with this high concentration of hydrogen ions on the inside and a low concentration of hydrogen ions on the outside of the thylakoid, the facilitated diffusion of these ions through ATP synthase, that energy is used to convert ADP into ATP. Now, one thing, you don't need to know this, but I'm going to say it just in case some of you guys are confused. Now, you might be wondering, hey, why does it say 12H2O? Because by now you should know that the formula is 6H2O plus 6CO2 gives you C6H12O6 plus 6O2. Why is it 12? Well, it's really 12, but you don't need to know this, but it takes 12 NADPH in order to make one glucose molecule. Well, to get 12 NADPHs, you're going to need 24 electrons because each NADP accepts 2 electrons and a hydrogen. So you're going to need 24 electrons. So in order to get 24 electrons, you need 12 water molecules to get those 24 electrons. Now, in photosynthesis, plants and algae actually make 6 H2Os as well. So that's another product. Now, we just kind of skip that. We pretend like it only takes 6 water molecules because you use 12, you make 6. So to make it easier, we just say it's 6 H2Os. So anyways, I just wanted to say that just in case you saw that 12 and got confused. All right, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understand some of this, and I'll talk to you next time.